What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Conquer Athlete podcast. I am here with my buddy, Jason Leydon, ready to drop some knowledge on you guys today. So we're going to keep this one short and sweet. Last week, we went into story time deep. So we're going to keep this one to the pertinent points. And
are you prefacing the talk with that to prevent me from going into story time, Ryan?
No, I'm not. I think this one is a little bit more kind of to the point. I don't want to say factual. It's not factual. Like everything you said last week was factual, but this one's a little bit more cut and dry, a little bit more, I think, black and white, bullet point style.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're gonna talk about why mastering the basics wins long term and how you really can't discount the fundamentals when we're talking about developing athletes. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about the Coach RX Podcast Network. We are a podcast on that platform. If you guys are a coach or an athlete, it is a very worthwhile resource to go check out. A lot of good coaches putting a lot of good content out there, both on the athlete development side and coach development side. So if you're looking to grow, looking to develop, definitely go check out the Coach RX Podcast Network.
Ryan, we also have the CrossFit Games coming up in a short amount of time.
Semantics.
I'm assuming you don't follow the gossip, but Danielle Brandon left her coach and the new coach 2 weeks before the games, which seems like a weird move.
I'll be honest. I don't care about any of that. That seems, I don't know all the details. I'm sure if the details haven't made it to light, I'm sure they'll come out. And who knows, people can chastise me on Instagram if they want, but I live in my circle. I try not to step outside of that. And that just sounds like drama. It sounds like drama and it kind of sounds like standard procedure. It sounds like standard procedure for Danielle. So good luck. You're a stellar athlete. I'm sure you had your reasons and more power to you.
Yeah.
I don't even know who her coach was.
Brute. The guy, Coach L from Brute. But she's with him for like a while, I thought. And then I just think it's so weird. Like 2 weeks before the game, just like, go to the new coach. Weird.
Yeah, it's weird,
It's like saying like 2 weeks before a fight, you're like, I'm going to drop my coach and go with this new coach.
I mean, whatever. This is not the topic.
It's not.
We were going to avoid story time, but this is a worthwhile story.
You did. I couldn't help it. I had to go into story time.
No, I like it. I think, as a coach, I think there's a lot that goes into that. Maybe she thought he was holding her back in some regard, or maybe didn't agree with the training philosophy, or, it's something deeper. But, as an athlete, not that I was any sort of high level athlete, but if it's additional stress, if you're like your coach is just for whatever reason offering or adding significant amounts of stress into your life, maybe it's honestly the best thing she ever did. If that's the thing that she feels is really holding her back or not getting her to where she needs to be, then why hold on to something that either one isn't adding fulfillment, isn't adding any sort of progress to her career, cut the cord. And, she's obviously not dumb. She's made it to that level. So she obviously understands how to play the game of the sport. And if she feels like she can do it better without that coach, then have at it.
Yeah, well said. Completely non-related story. I apologize. Have you ever seen the movie Beer Fest? It's with the guys from Super Troopers. All right, the scene when they pull up to the male hooker and he starts talking about HJs and ZJs, and if you don't know the ZJs, you can't afford it.
Yes, I also can't wait to see how you tie this into anything.
So I'm terrible at movie quotes and memorizing anything from movies, but for some reason that one I can remember, right? So I'm on this big thread for my son's baseball team, for the travel baseball team. It's like, all these moms and dads and stuff. And occasionally I try to lighten the mood. And we were talking about hotels, and we got to go to Jersey this weekend. And the hotels, like $250 a night. You got tax add on. It's going to be crazy, right? I was like, damn, I'm going to have to work these streets and start handing out some HJs and ZJs all night long. And no one responded. And I was pretty upset about that. I'm like, how do you not, if you don't even understand the movie Beer Fest, that's a funny, I feel like that's a funny line to start talking about hand jobs and ZJs. And I was like, and I even slid it at the end. If you don't know what a ZJ is, you probably can't afford it. Crickets. And I'm like, you know what? I got to rethink my friendships here, because if I can't drop an HJ and CJ line out of nowhere and have someone at least give me an LOL or a thumbs up, like I don't know if we can be friends.
I think that's very true. I also have some concerns of what people actually think about you. Like, are they like, damn, maybe we should take a GoFundMe up for Jay so he doesn't have to go work the street? Like, maybe they're actually really concerned about you working in the background.
That'd be fantastic. You know what, Jay? We took care of your hotel. Oh, it's great. Line them up. I'll give out ZJs all night to just you guys.
Yeah, man. I don't know. I go to my
I'm the guy where, like, if you leave a sheet of paper laying around,
dicks.
oh, there might be a few wieners drawn on it.
Big, veiny, triumphant motherfuckers. And if you don't get that reference, go watch Superbad.
Is that super bad? Okay, that's
Yeah.
right. Super bad. Yeah. Okay, mastering the basics for long-term growth. There we go, Ryan. Let's go.
I love it. Yeah, dude, I want to hear your thoughts on this, on around, like, obviously hear your thoughts, but you know, you have had the really unique opportunity coaching at Power Monkey specifically to just be around like tacticians in specific areas of the sport, whether that's gymnastics, whether that's weightlifting, conditioning. Like, you have really gotten to talk to and spend, at least I assume, a lot of exclusive time with individuals who are dedicated with single modality. Like, that is their thing. They have reached incredibly high levels in that single modality, and now they're bringing it over to the sport, or kind of sharing their lessons learned with that. Everybody talks about gymnastics when we start talking about the fundamentals. I want to talk about some of the things outside of it, whether that's barbell work, conditioning work, and one, how you approach developing the fundamentals with athletes, and, you know, maybe at the end, wrap it all up on why it's really important, even for the elite, to go back and revisit the fundamentals and almost kind of like check a box and be like, okay, do we still really possess this skill at a high level?
I love this question, because this is a question that I think a lot about. As you're talking about it, I was writing down notes. And
I thought you were drawing dicks, personally.
That too. And I want to share a story that ties this all in. Okay. And I share this story whenever I do basketball camps, whenever I was like coaching Little League. I always opened up every practice with this Kobe Bryant story. And Nike used to run, or still runs, camps. Right? They've run it forever, where they bring in the best athletes in the world. They come in and run these camps, and they used to have these Nike camps for basketball. And I keep saying used to because I'm sure they do, but I just haven't read upon it. But there's a story I heard, and it was a strength and conditioning coach who worked for Nike, and he was brought in to be at the camp for the high school athletes, to talk to them about strength training and developing their bodies for college, and pros for the ones who were going pro. Kobe Bryant was there working the camp. And Kobe was known for the way he trained. You know, I'm going to sidetrack for a second. Dave Durante told a story when he was in the Olympics and he went into the weight room. Whenever the Team USA came into the weight room, no one else could be there, right? Because normally people for the Olympics, like just average people, right? And then you have the dream team coming in. And he was in there training, and the team came in, they're kind of like, you know, messing around, doing some things. He goes, but when Kobe walked in, the energy changed, because Kobe was 100% about business, not friends. He came in, and Dave said Kobe would like just train his ass off for the time that he was in the gym. Didn't bullshit, didn't talk, was locked in, did everything he had to do, and then left. You know, it's like when people were coming, you guys here, where they coming back from partying, and Kobe's on his way to the weight room. The strength coach goes up to Kobe, and he goes, hey, Mr. Bryant, I'm here with Nike, I'm the strength coach. They're like, nice to meet you, you know, the whole introduction. And he was like, I'm a fan of you, and I'm a fan of hearing stories about the way you train. And for people who know the story, because it's been said a couple times, forgive me if I say the wrong things. He goes, I just want to watch you work out. He goes, I'm going to be a fly in the wall. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to try to interject. I'll literally just want to sit on the side. I want to observe. So Kobe's like, all right, 4 o'clock. And the coach is like, all right, cool, 4 o'clock. He goes, well, you know, Kobe, the camp's 9 to 5. He goes, what do you mean 4 o'clock? He goes, 4 a.m. He's like, oh, shit. Okay. So he tells a story about how he was determined to get to there before Kobe, to show Kobe, like, okay, you know, I'm ready. So he gets his Uber, he pulls up. It's like 3:30 a.m. Pulls up to the gym, his heart drops. Lights are already on the gym. He's like, he looks at the clock, he goes, it's 3:30 a.m. He goes, are you fucking kidding me? Pulls up, he gets to the door, and you hear the shoes squeaking at basketball. Like nonstop. Walks in, Kobe's already drenched in sweat. The dude's probably been there for like half hour already, kind of training his tail off. Walks in there, sits down, doesn't say a word. He sits there for like 2 hours. Whole time, Kobe's in there. Jab step crossovers, jab step one dribble pull-ups. For people who don't follow basketball, just the basics, the fundamentals, as hard as he could, nonstop. It gets over, he walks up to Kobe. He goes, Kobe, thank you very much for allowing me to be in here. You had a blast. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate you allowing me to sit in here. He goes, I just have one question I got to ask you. Kobe's like, what's going on? He goes, the whole time, you're training. Basics, fundamentals, jab steps, shot fakes, pump fakes, jab step, two dribble pull-ups. He goes, I never saw you do the crazy stuff that all these people doing, like, the 800 dribble moves, all this craziness. He goes, you just focus on the basics and the fundamentals. He goes, do you ever do any of this other stuff? Like, why do you keep doing this? Kobe stops. He looks at him. He goes, why do you think I'm the best basketball player in the world? That story sums up everything to me of the mastering of the basics that so many people skip at different levels, whether they're beginners or whether they're pros. You take someone like Kobe Bryant, who is in conversation of the greatest basketball player to ever play the game. He's in conversation for that. And he hammers the fundamentals and basics at that level of being the best in the world. And he was so focused and dedicated to it. I mean, there's so many stories you hear about Kobe where even when he was in high school, these other pros would come around to train with him. He would go into a separate room, put a blind up so you couldn't see, and just train by himself for hours on end. He was telling a story how when he used to train his daughter, he's like, everyone does all this crazy stuff. He goes, I just need her to master the basics. Once you master the basics, your entire game elevates, because then you can add and stack everything else onto the basics. And if you don't master the basics, you have a weak foundation that you can't keep building upon, right? And if you think about that, which Kobe Bryant was saying, that ties into everything you do in any sport. You look at boxers, right? The boxers who go in, and the first thing they do is they don't even touch anything until they master their footwork. They master that ground up connection of utilizing the feet into the hips and generating the power. Then it's from there, it's what? All right, just master the jab, then the cross, then the jab cross, right? As opposed to coming in and doing these 8 to 12 punch combos that you're never ever going to utilize in a fight ever, right? That translate to nothing, right? You look at basketball players, and you have the basketball players who have, if you take apples for apples in terms of athletic ability, you understand and can see who put time in with the fundamentals and who didn't. Because the jump shots, the pivot work, the footwork, the ball handling, the passing, the IQ is better. Right, yeah, at some point, like, athleticism will win, but when you take athleticism for athleticism, you know the difference. And you can tell, and those people will last longer and go farther. So, and you look at weightlifters, weightlifting protocols. You read Tommy Kono's books from back in the day, and you read Greg Everett's books. You listen to Mike Bergener talk. You talk to Wes Kitts, and you talk to anybody, right? You talk to any high-level coach in weightlifting. It's the basics. It's building muscles, building a strength, absolute strength foundation, converting that into positional strength and power, and then mastering the lifts once they've created that. And then rinse, wash, and repeat based upon your weight class and where you're trying to go. And you talk to these people in gymnastics, and it's the same thing, right? As kids, they're doing nothing but mastering the basics so hard that these things that we look at as challenging, right? Handstand walks, strict ring muscle ups, to them, that's nothing. Right, that's just something to get into a move because they've mastered the basics so much. You put so much time and effort in that. And then somewhere along the lines came the sport of CrossFit. And in the very beginning, there was this skipping of the basics. Right, it's like, oh, you can't do ring muscle ups, so do more ring muscle ups. Like, okay, you've never snatched before. Well, let's get on this snatch cycle and just start snatching. Why? Because that was sexy and that's what sold. And all the people that did that fizzled out very fast. Their functional ceiling, their longevity approach was very diminished. But the people that came in at that time, through the sake of luck and circumstance, had exposure to the basics of those things, they were able to last a ton longer because they had the foundation to support where they want to go with it. So to me, the sport of CrossFit, of mixed modal sports, when you think of weightlifting and you think of gymnastics and you think of conditioning work, that shouldn't have a different approach the way we look at baseball and boxing or Brazilian jiu-jitsu or basketball or wrestling. Like, if you want someone to be good and to reach a certain level in any sport, they have to put time into the basics of the sport and do well. You want someone to be good at basketball, they better have a good jump shot and understand how to dribble the ball, and then work on the basketball IQ of reading defenses and coming off picks and jab steps and setting themselves up for success. You want someone to be a good baseball player, well, kids can get away with a terrible swing in Little League because they're using these juice bats. But the second the pitcher understands how to throw an 80 mile per hour fastball with a 65 to 70 mile per hour curveball, sliders, cutters, changeups, and can locate it, Well, a shitty swing is going to mean you're not going to hit the ball at all once you get a wooden bat in your hands and the pitcher can locate that ball, right? If people don't understand how to have proper pitching mechanics, well, then they're going to hurt themselves. They can't keep increasing velocity and speed because their mechanics stink. So everything is translatable across sports. And when you start thinking about mixed modal sports like a sport, you need to think about the different components of a mixed modal sport and how can I instill the foundations here to set myself up for long-term health and growth and sustainability. Because if you don't have that, each person's functional ceiling is going to be limited by the lack of their foundational support to what they're trying to create. Meaning, we look at capacity and building an engine. You first came into the sport, if people didn't come into it with an endurance background and all they tried to do was hammer that glycolytic state, well, at some point they still had a terrible, shitty VO2 and aerobic threshold and they still bombed out really early, depending upon the variety of the demands of the sport. And then their ability to recover was really bad. And then they almost had to backtrack, as opposed to taking the time to understand the importance of building that aerobic capacity, building your aerobic threshold, and increasing that until the demands of anaerobic threshold and VO2 max. To me, to sum that up, it's so important for coaches to understand, depending upon what sport I'm in, whether we're talking about like high rocks or CrossFit or mixed martial arts, whatever it is, right? And we're utilizing the weight room for what are the basics of the sport and what foundations do I have to build to give them the support of which we can keep growing and building this house upon. Because if you think about trees and buildings, the tallest trees in the world have the deepest or broadest roots, right? The buildings that can sustain the longest, that are the tallest, have the strongest foundation in the bottom to support that. And we have to look at athletes in the human body the same way. We need to establish that foundation for the different modalities, and then we can build upon it and create success, and then come back to it as we need to keep elevating the ceiling depending upon the future demands.
Can you elaborate a little bit on foundation of support?
Yeah, so let's say we're looking at barbell work. We need to get people stronger, okay? Well, for me, I look at that from a foundational standpoint. Well, what's their structural integrity, and how well is their stability, and how well is their movement through the ranges, the mobility, flexibility through the ranges for the demands of the movement? Cool, that's part of foundation. Check that box off. From there, well, now, do they have the muscles to support the strength demands of what they're trying to create? Yeah, some people are blessed with great strength on smaller frames, but some people aren't. So do they have the frame to support the first goal of strength of what we're trying to get to? So to me, I look at someone's building barbell strength, and we talk about absolute strength, and we're referencing this in terms of deadlift, back squat, press, weighted pull-up. Do they have that foundation of joint integrity, structural stability, structural integrity, movement mechanics, and then that frame of support to build the strength required? If not, yes, okay, we have to increase the muscle cross-section area to get the muscles bigger, to be able to convert that to more strength, and then be able to move down the line of getting them stronger with proper mechanics of the movement. If it's someone that's never ever back squatted before, well, then we got to sequence that protocol through that, right? What's that? Well, maybe we got to start with a support air squat, into an air squat, into a goblet squat, into a zercher squat, into a wedge board squat, into a front squat. Then boom, now we're increase that higher top echelon of the back squat and building that support to get them to where they need to be. And once we get there, okay, now do we need to go back and rework that framework to be able to convert into that more strength? Or we get where we are and we keep focusing on the strength. So that foundation to me is everything that puts them into a successful position to reach that strength protocol in terms of keeping it in regards to absolute strength.
That's fantastic. I think that's definitely something coaches don't lean enough on, in looking just at your athlete and how deep those roots actually run. Like from an assessment standpoint, I think that's actually a great, visualization or something you can kind of lean on in your own assessment practices. Your tree is your athlete, and then you break down all these different modalities. Well, how deep are those roots actually, running down into the ground to create those? And then you have little sub roots coming off those main branches that are all, movement quality, tendon ligament strength, and all the different facets of what goes into building a base layer foundation. So I think that's great. So with an advanced athlete, you've obviously, quote, advanced athlete, you've built them up through the progression hierarchy. Do you bring them back around in the off season and retest a lot of those things? Or is it not something you realistically, are coming back to once they've reached a certain threshold of progression?
That's a great question. I always bring them back and I assess and I test, and I will get a clear understanding of, okay, this is an advanced person. We got to this specific level. Do we need to increase a level for them to stay successful where we need to get to? If we do need to increase a level, what is that level that we have to increase to? And does their foundation that we have support this new ceiling we need to get to? So then you run through your assessments to get a clear understanding if they have the support for that. And even, or just to kind of, sometimes you might kind of back off and run through some foundational work just to give the central nervous system a break, just to change up the training protocol, just to allow the system to re-energize and reinvigorate versus hammering that same high-end, high-level stuff over and over and over again, right? And then that can even catapult them a little bit farther just from a fatigue management, load management standpoint with the athlete. Because it's no different than other sports, right? What happens is the higher level athletes, they reach this stage, and then in a mixed modal world, it's the amount of volume and work, that minimal essential strain changes. So the amount of work that we need to do for them to create a change and adaptation to get to this next level is going to look different now than it did for this person 2-3 years ago, right? It's like taking these elite level athletes in other sports, baseball, basketball, BJJ, like you take a Major League Pro baseball player, are they still doing tee work in the off season? Yeah, they're still hitting off tee work. Their focus and attention to detail might be slightly different, but they're still going tee work, into front toss work, into pitching work, into the cage, into getting all these swings in repeatedly, refining their ability to see the ball, see spin on the ball, hit the ball, take the ball to the direction they need to take it, right? You look at boxers, you reach these guys who are champions, they're still doing footwork technique, they're still doing jab work, they're still doing slip work, they're still working on all different combinations that they need to. I don't think it changes in the world of mixed modal sports. You take people who might get to the games or be at this high level world championship level, there comes a point you need to, when the season ends, you have to reassess, retest them. Okay, where do we need to get to for you to stay at this level, for you to stay successful, for you to reach where you need to reach? What's going to be in the world of this sport, it is, what's my guess of what the demands are going to be of where you need to be to stay successful? Does your foundation, does your level of basics support that, right? Do we need to regroup and work on a few things to get you to where you need to be? 9 times out of 10, most of the times, yes, we need to rework a few things. We need to get that foundation. We need to go back to the basics for a cycle or two. Now, that cycle is probably be a lot shorter for these people than that cycle is going to be for longer people. And that's something that we have to keep in mind is somebody comes back to this stage, the amount of time that we need to put into a cycle to create this foundational change, this return to the basics is going to look shorter than for someone that's never reached this level, right? And that's the main thing that we want to think about with these higher level athletes is, yes, we still go through this process. We still need to understand where they are, but their time inside the process is going to be shorter. It's going to be different before we move on to that next phase to get them to where they need to be. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches kind of skip over. They take these athletes who they see that at this exceptionally high level, and then we feel because they've already reached this level, they don't need this regenerative time inside the basics, inside the foundations. But we all do, right? I look at, these people coming through, these Olympic athletes in the sport, they're still putting time in the basics for them to continually build that basement that can elevate that 1% even more, right? Because the bigger that basement is, the bigger your baseline is around the demands and modalities of the sport, the better and better and better, and the higher your ceiling is going to be able to go, and the better you're going to have a chance of reaching the top of your ceiling. So that's something that's so important to keep in mind when you're talking about mastering the basics for athletes with inside long-term growth and health for their sport, where they want to go. You look at these sports and it doesn't change. Things don't change. The best of the best in the sport have spent years and years and years mastering the basics and the foundations, and they continue to master the basics and foundations. And that shouldn't be different for our sport. I think we spend too much time inside of our sport, and I say our sport, I'm referring to CrossFit, of not putting the proper time in for the basics, not putting the time in to master what they need to master to elevate. So think about that with your athletes. Get a good understanding of what the demands are. Truly assess what their ceiling is and where it is. Understand what that foundation is and how well it can support where they need to get to. Put the time in to build that foundation, to put them the chance for success to reach where they need to reach. And then once they get there, rinse, wash, and repeat to get them elevated even higher of where they need to go. So guys, I hope you found this podcast helpful and informative. I hope you'll get some good information out of it. As always, like Ryan said in the beginning, be sure to check out the Coach RX podcast section. That's where you're going to find this podcast and many, many others. I'm not sure, Ryan was having some technical difficulty, so he kind of jumped off, but we'll be back next week with another awesome podcast. If you guys have something specific you want us to talk about, let us know. Until next time, I'll see you guys.